We are taking broccoli and we're giving it a new identity by baking it with a crispy cheese crust. This is going to transform it into an amazing appetizer. And to make things even more irresistible, we're pairing it with a mouth-watering dipping sauce that's as easy as it is delicious. For the full ingredient list, check the description box below, but enough talking, let's get cooking. The first thing we gotta do is we gotta make our dipping sauce, but even before we do that, we gotta get that big pot of water boiling that takes forever, and we gotta preheat our oven so everything's ready when we need it. I'm gonna put the convection setting on 415. You can do this recipe on a regular oven too, but I think the convection helps it get a little crispier. All right, now let's make our dipping sauce. So we're gonna use a base of some 0% Greek yogurt. And you can also use sour cream. I just like using Greek yogurt because it's a lot of protein, it's not a lot of fat. So any place I can cut calories without cutting flavor, I'm gonna do it. Now we're gonna put in a few tablespoons of some mayonnaise. And here I got avocado oil mayonnaise because that's just what I like to use, but feel free to use whatever mayonnaise you like. I know people get really particular about which mayonnaise is the best mayonnaise. Just as always, do what you like. Next up is gonna be some sriracha. Sriracha is gonna add the red color, it's gonna add the spiciness, it's also gonna add a little bit of sweetness. And now for some acidity, we're gonna add a little bit of vinegar. Next up, we're gonna add some garlic paste. I haven't really used this a whole lot, but since I bought this a few recipes ago, I've been finding a lot of application for it inside sauces. This is a great way to add garlic flavor without having to puree garlic, which takes a little bit of time. Now we're gonna add a little bit of my base seasoning. This is a blend of garlic powder, onion powder, salt, and pepper. A little bit of some smoked paprika for that nice smoky flavor. So out of that, we're gonna cut up some fresh chives, but before you cut fresh chives, you gotta make sure your knives are sharp. This tumbler sharpener really makes sharpening knives so easy and so fast. So before I cut these chives, I'm definitely just gonna give this a little sharpen. And just like that, this thing is sharp as can be. Now to cut these chives, we're gonna line up all the ends as evenly as we can. Gonna pick out any of the crappy ones. These all look pretty good. And then we're gonna roll them inside the paper towel. Chives are one of the hardest things to cut and cut finely, and I think chives need to be cut super finely to put into a sauce like this, so this just makes the job so much easier. You roll it inside the paper towel, you clip off the ends, and now rocker chopper. And cut all the way to the end of the paper towel. If you need a little bit more, just push it forward and keep cutting. So now we're gonna take a little bit of these. I'm gonna save some that we're gonna sprinkle on the top of the sauce after, and these are gonna go right in there. We're gonna give this a little mix. And now I'm gonna put this in a container so this can chill out in the fridge while we make our broccoli. It's kind of essential for sauces, especially like this where they got a lot of components for all the flavors to come together. The longer that they can sit in the fridge, the better. The flavors just really develop and the sauces are really nice after it can sit for a little bit. Now let's trim our broccoli. We're gonna keep it in as big a chunks as possible. We don't want really small ones. When we smash them out, they seem to be a little better when they're bigger. So all I'm gonna do is turn this broccoli crown upside down, and then I'm just gonna trim off each of like the big florets. And I'm gonna try to keep them pretty big. So normally if I was making roasted broccoli, I might wanna trim these down into smaller sizes, but this is actually a pretty good size for what we're gonna do. And when I get down to the smaller ones, I'll try to keep the crown intact, and then I can split it into bigger ones. If you cut it too high, they'll all come off really small. I can always make them smaller. I can't make them any bigger. So that one I can probably cut in half again. I'm looking for the good place to split it. That looks pretty good. And this one I can split right here. Now that our broccoli is trimmed up and I can see that our water is boiling, let's head over to the stove to drop this broccoli in the water and blanch it. So I got this pot up to a rolling boil. I'm gonna add some salt to the water, And notice that it's a giant pot filled with a lot of water, and I'm gonna put a decent amount of salt in there. The salt is gonna season the water, so as the broccoli's cooking, it'll be seasoned. And there's a lot of water in there, so when I put this broccoli in there, that this pot of water is gonna maintain temperature and not cool down too much. If the pot is small, the broccoli will cool down the water and then the temperature will get messed up. So here we're gonna dump this broccoli in this water without splashing boiling water in my face. And we're gonna cook that for 3 minutes. You don't wanna overcook the broccoli on this recipe. You just want it to be fork tender, not super mushy. They've been in there for about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. That's gotta be enough. So now I'm gonna use the spider to remove the broccoli, and I'm putting it inside this strainer with this bowl on the bottom because we're gonna want the broccoli dry and not soaking in the water. So now to this baking tray, I'm gonna put some parchment paper on top, and I'm making sure that the whole thing is covered with the parchment paper, because the parchment paper is gonna make sure that this thing peels right off after it's done baking. And I'm gonna use 2 of my pre-cut sheets to really make sure even the edges are covered. So before we put down our cheese, we're gonna spray this down with a little spray oil. Here I'm using some extra virgin olive oil. And we're gonna use 2 kinds of cheese. So this is some roughly shredded Parmesan cheese that's gonna go down first. And I'm just gonna sprinkle it nice and evenly across the baking sheet. To that, we're gonna use some pre-shredded pizza cheese. So this is a 4-cheese blend that I love to use. So it's got mozzarella, some provolone, a little bit of Parmesan, and some Romano, but it's mainly mozzarella and provolone. Normally, when you're making cheese, things that the cheese needs to melt, you don't wanna use pre-shredded cheese because it's got like anti-caking stuff in there. But I find if you're trying to take cheese and trying to melt it and make it into like a crispy thing, it actually helps a lot. So this is actually better than using other cheese that you have to shred yourself. If you do that, you might want to add just a sprinkle of like some flour or some starch that's going to help pull all that cheese together so it crisps up nicely. So now we're going to take our broccoli florets and we're going to start to make like a little zigzag puzzle with just a little bit of space. So when you're cutting them, you can cut them and you can get a little bit of cheese in each one. And I'm just laying them in there in this alternating pattern with a little bit of space in between each one. And if one side has a flatter side, that's the side that's going down. And this is definitely something you do not want to overcrowd your pan. Whatever leftover broccoli you got, that just becomes your snacking broccoli out of the fridge. You can make something else with it or you can just eat it. Everybody needs to eat more vegetables. Now we're gonna take our meat pounder, meat flattener, whatever you wanna call this, and we're gonna smash it down. If you don't have one of these, you could always just use a bottom of like a flat glass would work well too. And I'm just gonna, with nice pressure, smash these flat. You know you cooked them enough when they flatten a little bit, but they don't mush. And it looks like I did a pretty good job of cooking these because they're flattening. Now we're gonna season with a little bit more of my base seasoning. This is that blend of garlic powder, onion powder, salt, and pepper. You can see how useful this stuff is. Nice and light right over the top. And a little spray of oil on the top just to make sure that these don't burn and get nice and brown and crispy. So now these are gonna go in our preheated oven from anywhere from like 20 to 30 minutes until the cheese is melted, brown and crispy on the edges, and the broccoli's a little crispy and browned as well. These have been in the oven for about 20 minutes. The color on these are perfect. You got this nice crispy brown edge. Everything on the inside is nice and crispy. We're gonna let this sit and really let this cheese cool down before we touch it, maybe like 5-10 minutes. I've also put it on top of this baking rack so air can go underneath so the bottom cools too. Now that this has had a chance to cool, let's try to peel it off in one piece. Let's get it off of the rack. And now what I like to do here is I like to loosen up the aluminum foil that's around the baking tray, and I'll open that up a little bit. We'll pick this up from the baking tray. Now separate it out from the parchment paper by peeling really gently. If you let this cool enough, this will be pretty easy. If it starts to stick a little bit and you think it's warm, just let it cool a little bit more. The cooling really helps it separate from the parchment paper. Like, look how amazing this crispy cheese crust that forms on the bottom as all the cheese melts together. I'm gonna try to lift this up and show it to you without destroying it. And now look at that, all just one piece. This looks unreal right now. So let me show you how I like to separate them out into individual pieces. You can definitely use a knife, but I think a pair of scissors, just cutting them out just like you're cutting coupons, is probably the best way to do it. So all I'm gonna do is cut them out piece by piece and place them right on my serving tray. And don't let any of this like little crispies that didn't make it to the serving platter. That's your chef snack. So good. This also makes cleanup a breeze. And now get that dipping sauce in our dipping bowl. And if you saved any of those chives, you can sprinkle those right on top of the dipping sauce. It really makes it pop, makes it super inviting. And now, how amazing does this look? I can't wait to try one. This is a really nice piece because I got the nice big broccoli floret on there. We got this super crispy crust on the bottom. And I want to show you how crispy this thing is. Listen to me drag a knife across it. I mean, that sounds like I'm dragging it on concrete. It's so crispy. That's what the Parmesan cheese will do. It's got the really nice crispy crust on the bottom. It's got the bendy cheese. This is why you got the best example of using both cheeses. So this is gonna give you that crispy crust of Parmesan, and then this is gonna make it bendy so it's easy to cut and it doesn't all crumble. But enough talking about this thing. Let's try this dipping sauce and let's see how it tastes. This is the best thing that I've had in a while. This is so good and it hits on so many levels. The creaminess, that little spice and the flavor from the sauce, the crispiness from the cheese. I love broccoli. Broccoli's really good. Oh man, this is super yummy. Even look at these little crispy Parmesan chips. These are so good. Paired up with the broccoli and the sauce, this is unreal. And I never thought of it like a crudité, like broccoli would be a great appetizer. You throw this out, I guarantee there will be a zero left and everybody will be asking you for the recipe. If you're into vegetables, check out my Kung Pao Brussels sprouts. That's a really nice take on a classic vegetable dish. I'll see you there. Thanks.